I'm just going to do a regular feeding. So I'm going to add a couple handfuls of shredded paper. All right. And I'm going to add some peat moss. Now, previously I added dirt. All right. I thought, oh yeah, dirt will be good. Problem is with dirt, yeah, you know what? It probably adds all those little microorganisms and all those things like that, but dirt, it compacts. All right. So I'm just going to do a simple feeding. Now, peat moss is acidic. Now, how acidic do I want this? Now, how do you balance out the acidity? All right. Well, throw some wood ash in there. Okay. So on average, you know, peat moss is probably, 5, 6 on the pH scale, and wood ash is quite high. Okay. Now, wood ash is probably around 10, 12. So I'm going to throw some of that in there. All right. And also, this is probably going to have a lot of minerals, micronutrients, and a little bit of sand. Okay. So we added the peat moss, okay, the newsprint, so it doesn't become compact. Sand will help with drainage, okay? And also sand basically is rock. So there's going to be minerals in there. So you're going to have the trace minerals. Okay, so we got our paper, we got our peat moss, we got our sand, and we got our wood ash, okay? And here is my pre-ferment, all right? Now, which is funny because when I went to Merle's mom's place, she has pretty much the same compost system as myself. She has a fermentation compost system, okay? Now, and she had this thing on top. So there's a whole bunch of fermenting food in there. I won't show you that and gross you guys out. All right. But this is not an aerobic. This is an anaerobic bacteria system, right? So it's not allowing air into it. So it composts quicker. It ferments. All right. This is what I put on top of here under the sink. Okay. And when it's filled, after a couple days, I put it into here. And then I take this little, looks like a potato masher, and I kind of bash it down. And I put this Bukashi brand inoculated stuff on top. I'll show you that later. I'm sure it's not necessary because you know what? Merle's mom doesn't use anything fancy like that I have to pay money for. All right. She just puts it in a bin and Bob's your uncle. All right. Now, the good thing about this is a whole bunch of liquid settles to the bottom, and this is what I got from that. Okay. There were some beets in it, so yeah, it's colorful. So now I'm going to take this and pour it into here, right? Because it needs to be wet. All right, so I'm just gonna reach into this bag of nastiness here. And this is going against everything that I did previously, because I used to grind all this up and make it nice and sort of pureed, but not really, because I figured, well, those worms, they have tiny mouths, and You know, how are they going to eat that? Well, then I figured out, you know, Myrtle told me, you know what? They don't eat the food, they eat the bacteria the food produces. Go figure. All right, so he said, don't get hung up with how nice and fancy it looks, all right? Be hung up with the aeration, because I think that's where Merle's right? Because if you take the food, you puree it up, you're turning it into a mash, it's gonna make the soil more dense, okay? And before I was adding compost, I said I added soil. No, I was adding compost, but essentially soil. And yes, it was way more dense. Now, if you look at this, not wet enough. All right? Because I guess more wet is way better than dry. All right? Especially with the system that I have, because it drains. Okay? Then it gives you that compost worm tea. All right? So you're never going to drown the worms. All right? If you just had them in a bin and there was an inch of water at the bottom, yeah, I can see it being an issue. All right? So that looks good. And generally, I have a tendency of keeping my worms a little bit drier than I should. So let's try this out. This is my first time I have started to put just nasty, like here, like Brussels sprouts and broccoli stems, just full on, right? Because I figure, you know what? Maybe if I puree them down, they will compost these quicker. You know what I mean? Turn them into castings quicker. But I'm gonna just throw caution to the wind and not be so dogmatic and try this out, you know? All right, so this is a bin that needs to be fed, okay? So this bin has all the same things as this, okay? Nothing different. Just a little bit more broken down, all right? But they do need to have a fresh batch of food every couple weeks, all right? So I'm creating a trough, okay? Like, see how fluffy this is? All right? That's the way you want to keep it, all right? That's why you use the newsprint, all right? Peat moss and whatnot. So let's grab this. Now, every time you feed it, you want to change the side, okay? All right, now, man, that looks good. Okay, and kind of put it into the trough, okay, and cover it, right? This is very important because you have to cover it. Because if you don't cover it, this will promote bugs, fruit flies, and all that nastiness. All right, so cover it. I haven't had any bugs or any sort of weirdness, right? And then next week, in 2 weeks from now, you'll put it on this side, right? Because it kind of trains them to go over here now, all right? And I'll put the top on. Actually, before I do that, let's have a look at how moist it is. Now, I'm going by what Merle does, okay? Now this seems okay, but when Merle, like there's a little bit of dampness there and it squeezes out. But you know what? I have a drainage spout right there. And by the way, whatever comes out of there, you feed that to your plants. That is the money shot right there. That is pure fertilizer, okay? So just to be on the safe side, I'm gonna take this water. Now I'm not using tap water with chlorine and all that craziness. I'm sure you can, and just do it if you have to. Who cares? This is whatever reverse osmosis system that I have in the place, all right? And I noticed with this, there's not gonna be any chlorine, right? Because I've done a chlorine test on this. It has no chlorine, and normally the pH of my water is like 7.6 or some crazy number. It is totally neutral, if not a little acid. Okay, so take it as it is. So here's the feeding. And let's carry on.